Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the shadows, exploring the facts and fears that linger in the dark corners of our world. Tonight, we venture into a story that chills to the bone, a story of a man, a phone call, and a disappearance that remains a haunting riddle nearly a decade after it began. This is the tragic and perplexing case of Brandon Lawson, a young man who vanished into the vast, unforgiving landscape of West Texas, leaving behind only a chilling, fragmented phone call and an enduring mystery that continues to baffle investigators, armchair detectives, and his devastated family. Brandon Lawson was 32 years old when he disappeared on the night of August 3, 2012. He was a father, a son, a brother, living in San Angelo, Texas. His life, like many, had its ups and downs, its challenges and its joys. He worked in the oil fields, a physically demanding job that often took him away from home. He had a family he loved, including his longtime girlfriend, LaDonna, and their 4 children. But beneath the surface, Brandon was also struggling with some personal demons, including a history of drug use, a factor that sadly cannot be ignored when we talk about the circumstances surrounding his vanishing. His life was not perfect. It was real, it was complicated, and it was about to take a turn into the truly unknown. The day Brandon disappeared began like any other Friday, or at least it started that way. He had been working, doing what he normally did. But as the evening progressed, things began to unravel. According to his girlfriend, LaDonna, they had an argument. A disagreement like many couples experience. But this one, unfortunately, escalated. It led to Brandon deciding to leave their home. He gathered a few things, perhaps some clothes, perhaps some supplies, and he got into his pickup truck. This decision, made in the heat of a moment, would set into motion a chain of events that would end in his complete disappearance. He left, perhaps to cool off, perhaps to go to a friend's house, perhaps for any number of reasons that a person might leave after an argument, but he never returned. As the hours passed, Brandon began making phone calls. He called his younger brother, Kyle, several times. The exact content of all these conversations is not fully known, but what is clear is that Brandon was experiencing some kind of trouble. He told Kyle that he had run out of gas, that his truck had stalled somewhere on a desolate road. He was on a rural stretch of Highway 277, south of Bronte, Texas, a place known for its vast, empty spaces, its harsh climate, and its quiet, almost eerie solitude at night. This was not a well-populated area. It was an area where help might be a long time coming. Kyle, being a good brother, immediately offered to help. He told Brandon he would bring him some gas. This was a common enough occurrence for anyone driving through such remote areas, a simple, fixable problem. Kyle got into his own vehicle and began the drive to his brother's reported location. The plan was straightforward: bring gas, get Brandon back on the road, and resolve the situation. But as Kyle drove, the situation took a far darker turn. Brandon called him again. This time, his tone was different. It was frantic, it was urgent, it was distressed. He spoke of being in trouble, of needing help beyond just gas. He mentioned people, he mentioned things that were not clear. He sounded scared. And then, Brandon made the call that would echo through the years, the call that would become the cornerstone of this entire chilling mystery. The 911 call. It was just after 11:30 at night, specifically 11:50 at night, on August 3, 2012. Brandon Lawson dialed 911. The call, once released to the public, quickly became infamous. It is a fragmented recording, filled with static, unclear voices, strange noises, and Brandon's increasingly desperate pleas for help. The initial moments of the call are almost impossible to decipher fully. It sounds like a jumble of words, a cacophony of sound, but what can be heard, even through the distortion, is deeply disturbing. Brandon sounds panicked. He is not speaking calmly, he is speaking quickly, almost hysterically. Let's try to break down this call, piece by piece, understanding that much of it is open to interpretation due to the poor audio quality. The call begins with the dispatcher asking if he needs police, fire, or ambulance. Brandon's first words are incredibly difficult to make out. Some have heard him say, "I ran into these guys," or "I'm in the middle of a field," or "I just got into a wreck." The truth is, it's almost impossible to say with absolute certainty what he says right at the start. But the urgency in his voice is unmistakable. He is not calling for a flat tire. He is calling for something much more serious. Then there's a distinct pause. Or perhaps a moment where Brandon is trying to gather his thoughts. Or perhaps something else is happening around him. He then seems to say, more clearly, "Yes, I'm in the middle of a field." This statement, if accurate, immediately raises questions. He told Kyle he ran out of gas on the highway. Why would he now be in the middle of a field? Did he leave his truck? Was he forced to leave his truck? This simple phrase suggests a significant change in his immediate circumstances. The dispatcher asks him where he is. Brandon's response here is again heavily distorted. It sounds like he might be giving a location, perhaps near a specific landmark, or perhaps naming a road. But it is not clear enough for the dispatcher to pinpoint his exact whereabouts. This lack of a clear location is one of the most frustrating aspects of the call, making immediate assistance almost impossible. And then comes perhaps the most famous, or infamous, line from the call, the one that has fueled endless speculation. Brandon says, "I'm going to be in a field and I need help. I ran into these guys and I'm going back to the road." This particular phrase is incredibly puzzling. "I ran into these guys" suggests an encounter, perhaps accidental, perhaps hostile. "And I'm going back to the road" implies he left the road in the first place, perhaps to avoid something, or perhaps he was forced off. The interpretation of "these guys" is crucial. Are they good Samaritans? Are they a threat? The tone of his voice points strongly towards the latter. He does not sound like someone who has found friendly assistance. He sounds like someone in grave danger. The call continues, with the dispatcher trying desperately to get clear information from Brandon. She asks him to clarify his location, to speak more clearly. But Brandon's responses remain garbled and frantic. There are distinct sounds in the background, a low rumble, perhaps an engine, perhaps wind, perhaps something else entirely. Some listeners claim to hear a second voice, muffled, distant, but present. Is it another person with Brandon? Is it someone threatening him? This is one of the most debated elements of the call. If there was another person, who was it, and what was their role in Brandon's disappearance? At one point, Brandon seems to say, "We're not talking to him." This line is also extremely ambiguous. Who is "we"? Is he talking about himself and someone else? Or is he saying "we" as in, "I am not talking to him," referring to the dispatcher, perhaps because he is distracted or being told not to talk? Or is he referring to someone else he encountered? The very next thing he says is, "I'm in a deep field." Again, this re-emphasizes his location away from the road. The dispatcher asks if he needs an ambulance. Brandon replies, "No, I need the cops." This is a clear indicator that he perceives a threat, not a medical emergency. He specifically requests law enforcement, indicating a belief that he is in danger from other people. Then comes another highly debated sound. Many believe they hear what sounds like a gasp or a grunt, followed by a distinct clicking noise, almost like a gun cocking. This particular moment sends shivers down the spine. If it truly is the sound of a firearm being readied, it would confirm the worst fears. That Brandon was indeed facing a hostile encounter, potentially an armed one. The dispatcher, still trying to get information, asks again where he is. Brandon's final audible words are extremely distorted, but some have interpreted them as, "I just got back to the road, they're after me," or "They are going to kill me," or "They just shot me." It is impossible to say for sure, But whatever he says, it is uttered with absolute terror. The call then abruptly ends. The last sound heard is a sudden, sharp, loud crackle, like the phone being dropped, or disconnected, or destroyed. And then, silence. The total length of the 911 call is about 5 minutes, but only a small portion of it is truly intelligible. The rest is a harrowing tapestry of static, unclear words, and unsettling background noises. The call log from the dispatcher's side indicates a strange disconnect. She apparently did not hear much of what Brandon was trying to convey, which is a common problem with emergency calls from remote areas with poor cell service. But what she did hear, or perhaps what she intuited, was enough to dispatch a sheriff's deputy. A call was put out. A deputy was sent to the general area, but without a precise location, and with the call cutting out, the search was already at a severe disadvantage. While Brandon was making this desperate call, his brother Kyle was still on his way. Kyle arrived at the reported location where Brandon's truck had supposedly run out of gas. And there it was, Brandon's pickup truck. It was parked oddly, off the side of the road, leaning slightly. The doors were locked, the lights were off, but Brandon was nowhere to be seen. Kyle searched the immediate area, calling out for his brother. He found Brandon's cell phone charger inside the truck, but no phone. His wallet was also gone. The keys were gone. The gas can Kyle had brought was placed on the back of the truck. This was a critical detail. Brandon had told Kyle he needed gas, but the gas can brought for him was left untouched. This suggests that the gas issue was either resolved or became secondary to a more pressing, dangerous situation. Kyle called the authorities to report his brother missing. He explained the situation, the strange phone calls, the 911 call. Law enforcement arrived on the scene. They found the truck exactly as Kyle described. The immediate area was searched, but again, no sign of Brandon. The landscape around Highway 277 is typical West Texas terrain, flat, covered in mesquite brush, cactus, and tall grasses. It is a harsh environment, filled with rattlesnakes and other dangers. It is easy to get lost, especially at night. It is also an area where a person could disappear quite easily without leaving a trace. The vastness of it, the lack of distinguishing landmarks for miles around, makes any search operation incredibly difficult. The official investigation began. Sheriff's deputies from Tom Green County and Coke County were involved. They processed the scene around the truck. They interviewed Kyle and LaDonna. They listened to the 911 call. But the lack of a body, the lack of clear evidence of foul play at the truck itself, and the confusing nature of Brandon's last communication made it incredibly difficult to classify the case. Was it a simple missing person? Was it an accident? Was it a crime? Without concrete answers, it remained a baffling enigma. The initial search efforts were extensive. Deputies, K-9 units, and volunteers scoured the area. They walked grid patterns through the brush. They used ATVs. They even utilized small aircraft for aerial views. But the terrain was unforgiving. The summer heat in West Texas is brutal. Temperatures often soar above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Dehydration is a real and immediate threat. The ground is hard, covered in sharp rocks and thorns. Visibility is often poor due to dust and brush. Despite the dedicated efforts, no sign of Brandon was found. Not a single piece of clothing, not a single personal item, nothing. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Over the days and weeks that followed, the investigation continued, albeit with limited progress. Investigators revisited the 911 call, trying to enhance the audio, trying to make sense of the garbled phrases. They interviewed Brandon's friends and acquaintances, trying to piece together his last known activities, trying to understand who these guys might be. Given Brandon's history of drug use, law enforcement naturally explored the possibility that his disappearance was connected to drug-related activities. This is a common line of inquiry in missing persons cases where the individual has such a history, as drug transactions can sometimes lead to dangerous encounters or unpaid debts. But there was no concrete evidence to support this theory either. No specific individuals were identified as being involved. No known drug deals went wrong in a way that directly implicated Brandon. It remained a theory, but one without tangible proof. The family, especially Kyle and LaDonna, remained desperate for answers. They continued their own searches, often joined by volunteers from the community. They put up flyers. They spoke to the media. The story gained some traction online, attracting the attention of true crime enthusiasts who tirelessly debated the 911 call, analyzing every nuance, every sound. Many theories emerged, some plausible, some far-fetched. Let's explore some of these theories, as they represent the diverse attempts to make sense of Brandon's inexplicable vanishing. One prevailing theory is that Brandon succumbed to the elements. This is a very real possibility in West Texas. If he had indeed wandered off into the dense brush, perhaps disoriented by fear, by drugs, or by an injury, he could have easily gotten lost. The heat, the lack of water, the unforgiving terrain could have quickly led to incapacitation and ultimately death. His body, if it were to lie undiscovered in such a vast and wild area, could be rapidly scavenged by local wildlife or simply blend into the landscape over time, making discovery incredibly difficult. Even if he died of exposure, it would be a tragic end, but one that doesn't explain the 911 call's terrifying content. Why would he be running from these guys if he was just lost? This theory struggles to reconcile with the auditory evidence of a perceived threat. Another significant theory is that Brandon was a victim of foul play. The 911 call strongly suggests this. "I ran into these guys," and his frantic pleas for the police, coupled with the suspected sounds of struggle or a weapon, all point to an encounter with hostile individuals. If he was attacked, perhaps for his money, perhaps over a drug debt, or perhaps just a random act of violence, then his body could have been hidden. The vastness of the area makes it an ideal place to dispose of a body, especially if those responsible knew the local terrain well. A killer could have driven him further off the road, buried him, or left him in a remote location where he would never be found. The fact that his wallet and phone were missing from the truck, even if the truck was locked, could indicate that he was robbed. Or perhaps these items were simply with him when he fled. The truck itself provided very little forensic evidence to support a violent crime. No blood, no signs of a struggle. This means any altercation likely happened away from the vehicle after he left it. Then there is the possibility, however unlikely, that Brandon staged his own disappearance. Some might argue that his drug problems could have led him to flee, to start a new life away from his troubles. But this theory is incredibly difficult to reconcile with the 911 call. No one fakes that kind of terror. No one calls 911 in such distress if they are simply planning to run away. Furthermore, leaving his truck and the gas can untouched doesn't fit the narrative of a planned escape. People who disappear voluntarily usually take their belongings and try to blend in. They don't call emergency services in a panic. So while it's a theory that sometimes surfaces in missing person cases, it doesn't seem to fit the facts of Brandon Lawson's case at all. What about the drug-related theory? Could Brandon have been involved in something illicit that night? His calls to Kyle mentioned running out of gas, a seemingly mundane problem. But what if he was on his way to or from a drug deal? What if he owed someone money? Or what if he stumbled upon something he shouldn't have seen? The rural nature of the area, the isolation, could make it a prime location for illegal activities away from prying eyes. If Brandon encountered drug traffickers, or was involved in a deal that went bad, it could explain the guys he mentioned and the perceived threat. However, without any specific leads on who these individuals might be, or what the nature of their involvement was, this remains speculative. Law enforcement has certainly considered this angle, but without a body or new evidence, it is hard to move beyond theory. The role of the brother Kyle has also been scrutinized. It is natural for investigators to look at the last people to see or speak to a missing person. Kyle was the last known person Brandon communicated with before the 911 call cut out. Kyle was the one who found the truck. He was questioned extensively by law enforcement. He fully cooperated with the investigation, providing his account of the events. There has been no evidence whatsoever to suggest Kyle had any involvement in Brandon's disappearance. His account has remained consistent, and his actions that night, driving to help his brother, calling the police, seemed to be those of a concerned sibling. The family has endured unimaginable pain. LaDonna, his girlfriend, and their children have lived with the uncertainty for years. Not knowing what happened to a loved one is a unique kind of torture. There is no grave to visit, no closure to be found. Every passing day, every new tip, every search yields nothing but continued emptiness. They have tirelessly advocated for Brandon, keeping his story alive, hoping that someone, somewhere, knows something that can bring them answers. The agony of not knowing if Brandon is alive or dead, if he suffered, if he is alone, is a burden no family should have to bear. The geographical aspect of this case cannot be overstated. West Texas is vast, it is sparsely populated. A single county like Tom Green County, where San Angelo is located, covers thousands of square miles. Coke County, where the truck was found, is also massive and rural. These areas are not only expansive but also feature very difficult terrain. Mesquite trees, while not towering, are dense and thorny, forming impenetrable thickets. Canyons and ravines can hide things effectively. And then there are the numerous abandoned wells, old oil field equipment, and other man-made structures that could potentially conceal a body. The weather, as mentioned, is extreme. Hot summers, cold winters. All these factors make searching for a missing person, especially one who may have wandered off or been deliberately hidden, incredibly challenging. Consider the statistics for missing persons. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people are reported missing across the United States. While the vast majority are found, a significant number, many thousands, remain missing for extended periods, some indefinitely. The National Crime Information Center, or NCIC database, lists tens of thousands of active missing persons cases at any given time. For adults, the recovery rate tends to decrease significantly after the first few days. The golden hours, or golden 72 hours, are critical in a missing person investigation. This is the period immediately following a disappearance, when the chances of finding the individual alive are highest and evidence is most likely to be fresh. In Brandon Lawson's case, those golden hours were severely hampered by the lack of a precise location and the confusing nature of his 911 call. When a person goes missing in a rural or wilderness area, the challenges are even greater. The vastness of the search area, the difficult terrain, and the elements all work against searchers. According to various studies and law enforcement data, if a body is not found within a certain time frame, typically a few weeks to a few months, the chances of ever finding it decrease dramatically. Factors like decomposition, animal scavenging, and the elements can make a body virtually undetectable over time, even if searchers pass very close to it. In cases where foul play is suspected and the body is deliberately hidden, the odds of discovery diminish even further. The equipment used in searches, such as K9 search and rescue dogs, relies on scent. But scent trails can be quickly dissipated by wind, rain, heat, and time. Over a decade later, the likelihood of K9 units successfully tracking Brandon's scent is virtually zero. Aerial searches using drones or helicopters can cover large areas quickly, but they are limited by tree cover and dense brush. Ground searches, though thorough, are slow and labor-intensive. Without specific intelligence or a precise location, finding a needle in a haystack becomes a near impossible task. The case of Brandon Lawson has also garnered significant attention in online communities. Forums, subreddits, and social media groups are dedicated to discussing the case, analyzing the 911 call, and proposing new theories. While this public interest can sometimes generate new leads or keep a case in the public eye, it can also lead to misinformation, unverified claims, and speculation that does not always help the investigation. However, it also shows the enduring human fascination with unsolved mysteries and the desire for justice and closure. One of the more frustrating aspects for law enforcement in cases like Brandon's is the lack of direct evidence to shift the case from a missing person investigation to a criminal one. Without a body, without clear forensic evidence of a struggle or foul play at a specific location, it is incredibly difficult to bring charges against anyone, even if suspects are identified. Investigators are often in a difficult position. They can suspect foul play, but they need concrete evidence to proceed. The case remains officially a missing person case, but the chilling 911 call certainly suggests a more sinister outcome. The questions linger. They always will until answers are found. Who were these guys Brandon encountered? Were they a figment of a drug-induced paranoia or a real threat? Was Brandon injured before or during the call? What exactly did he say in those garbled final moments? Did he run from someone? Or was he taken? Why was his truck left in the condition it was? And why were his personal items missing? And most importantly, where is Brandon Lawson? There have been occasional tips and renewed searches over the years. Law enforcement agencies have stated that the case remains open and they are ready to act on any credible information. The family continues to hold out hope for a resolution, for the day they can bring Brandon home, whether alive or deceased, and finally find peace. But as time marches on, the evidence degrades, memories fade, and the answers become even more elusive. The Brandon Lawson case is a stark reminder of the fragile nature of life, how quickly a seemingly ordinary night can descend into a terrifying nightmare. It stands as a testament to the fact that sometimes, despite our best efforts, despite advanced technology, some mysteries remain stubbornly unsolved, shrouded in a veil of questions and fear. It also highlights the tremendous challenges faced by law enforcement in missing person cases, especially those in remote areas with minimal initial evidence. The family and the public have repeatedly called for more resources to be allocated to such cases. While every missing person is important, cases with such compelling and disturbing final moments, like Brandon's 911 call, naturally draw more attention and demand deeper investigation. The emotional toll on the family is immeasurable, living in a state of perpetual limbo, unable to properly mourn or move forward. They deserve answers. The narrative of Brandon Lawson is a cautionary tale, a puzzle with too many missing pieces. It emphasizes the unpredictability of life, the hidden dangers that can lurk in unexpected places, and the profound impact of a sudden, unexplained disappearance. The silent vastness of West Texas holds its secrets tightly, refusing to give up Brandon Lawson. Let us briefly reflect on the implications of such a prolonged disappearance. When a person goes missing for so long, families often face legal and financial challenges. There are estates to settle, children to care for, and the ongoing psychological burden. Some families choose to declare their loved one legally dead after a certain period, usually 7 years. But even this legal declaration offers little emotional solace when there is no body and no definitive answer about what truly happened. For Brandon's family, this legal step may have provided some administrative finality, but it does not resolve the deep emotional void. The hope for resolution, however faint, persists. A single piece of new evidence, a forgotten memory, a change of heart from someone who knows something, could potentially crack this case open. Perhaps someone listening to this right now knows something. Perhaps they heard something, saw something, or were even indirectly involved in something that could shed light on Brandon's fate. No matter how small or insignificant it may seem, That piece of information could be the key to bringing closure to a family that has suffered for far too long. The 911 call itself remains the most compelling and agonizing piece of evidence. It is a raw, unedited glimpse into someone's final moments of terror. The sounds, the fragmented words, the desperate plea for cops instead of medical help, all paint a picture of a man in dire circumstances, facing an immediate personal threat. The contrast between his simple request for gas and the terrifying reality of his later 911 call is stark and chilling. It transformed a routine roadside assistance call into one of the most perplexing missing person cases in modern history. The mystery of Brandon Lawson's disappearance continues to resonate because it taps into fundamental human fears. The fear of the unknown, the fear of being alone and vulnerable, and the fear of vanishing without a trace. It reminds us that sometimes, even with the best intentions and the most dedicated efforts, the truth can remain buried, just out of reach. The vast, silent plains of West Texas keep their secrets well, but perhaps one day they will yield the answers that Brandon Lawson's family so desperately seeks. We close tonight with the lingering questions. What happened to Brandon Lawson on August 3, 2012? Who were these guys he spoke of? And where is he now? If you have any information, no matter how small, please contact the relevant authorities. Every tip matters. Every piece of the puzzle could lead to the truth. Thank you for joining us on Whispered Unknown. Stay safe and remember to always stay vigilant. Good night.